Brian Smith here, and welcome to the Dreampath podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. All right, we're here to recap the Jim Haven and Mai Leisz episodes and also talk about some other fun stuff. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, well, it's good to be back in the room above my garage, which is our studio for now, our podcast studio. So let's talk about a couple of things. What did you think of the Mai Leisz episode?
I really liked it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And listening to her talk about her style of music and her approach to it and how she learned bass and not knowing the difference between a fretless and a fretted bass. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Picking up a fretless and just rocking it.
A 5-string fretless and not even a blink.
Dude, people go years and years without picking up a fretless, and it's such an intimidating instrument.
I would think that would. I've never actually played a fretless because I don't know anybody that has one, but I would think those would be really difficult to play because you're kind of playing by ear, really. I mean, there's positioning, but if you're not in that right spot, you gotta. Right.
Yeah, you have to really be confident and comfortable with, finger placement and hand placement. But yeah, I really enjoyed getting to know Mai in that interview. She was so smart and so intellectual about her approach to music. And also, it seemed like, and this is kind of a recurring theme with a lot of the people that I talk to, but it seemed like for her, first and foremost, the most important thing was just playing live and playing with other people who enjoyed music just as much as she does. Mm-hmm. In a way, fame and fortune really found her, and she just kind of stumbled into this situation
right
by following her passion into a subway in Stockholm, Sweden.
Right.
And who busks in a subway for fame and fortune?
Nobody.
Nah. You do that because you freaking love playing and you love performing and you love writing and composing and being in the moment. And so she's there. And then, of course, if you've listened to the episode, Jackson Browne's touring musician shows up, sees her, and the next night she's playing with Jackson Browne.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And then, and then she's touring with David Crosby, writing with him, and in the same studio with Paul McCartney.
Right.
And is doing, if you follow her on social media, she's just doing incredible things. And I think it's all driven by her love of music. It's not driven by anything. It's a very pure pursuit that I see happening there.
What I like about her, at least I think, is she seems very humble. There's none of this gone to her head stuff.
Oh, totally.
No, not a lot of ego there. She's very humbled about where she's at right now.
Right. And she talked about her performance at Bass Bash, which I saw down in Anaheim for NAMM. And one of her first comments I said, "Did you see me there? Did I make you nervous when I was taking pictures in front of the stage?" And she's like, "No, I didn't see anything other than, my trembling fingers, scared about how she's going to do, performing for the first time on her own in that band."
I'm sure she was terrified.
Yeah. So very cool to talk to Mai. And also, it's way cool to do that in the context of going to NAMM. Never been to NAMM before. North American Music Merchants, something or other. It's a really big deal for musicians and performers and audiophiles of all types. But I was given press credentials to go down there and check out the scene. And it was so overwhelming that I don't even think I can really process it and describe it adequately on this podcast. It was acres and acres of, booths filled with musical instruments and sound equipment and all kinds of crazy things happening in various rooms and in giant open rooms and walls of guitars that you would just kill your grandma for. I mean, they're just they're just amazing instruments. The Gibson room, the Les Pauls, the SGs, the Paul Reed Smith room, the Fender room. So I was only there for a couple hours, and I had to go be with my kids for Disneyland and prioritize them. But I do want to go back to NAMM and spend a couple of days there because I think there's a lot to learn, a lot of connections to make. and a lot of inspiration too to be found.
I wouldn't mind hanging out with you down there.
I'd love to go down there with you.
Yeah, I think that would be a blast.
Yeah, road trip, man.
Total geek out for me. I just would be, open mouth the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we also have the Jim Haven episode, and what'd you think about that?
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And, and of course, as I go along editing these things, I get to hear it and then hear it again, so yeah, he's a very interesting man. And I had to go and watch all the stuff that you guys were talking about. I had to go to his website and check out all the campaigns.
The Pacifico beer ads.
Pacifico beer and the thing he did with Starbucks. And then the one I'm really interested in is Red Bull Opus. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't catch that one.
It's not out yet, but it's a program that tracks people's movements, like athletes, snowboarders or whatever, and it turns their movement into music.
What?
Yeah, you'll need to check that out.
That's on his website?
That's on his website, and it's something that's in development.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh yeah. I've got to get it I'm not an athlete, but I can jump around and make some music.
Yeah. Jim is such a cool guy. I mean, he's one of these guys that kind of flies underneath the radar because he's not a household name. He's not a celebrity, but he is a storyteller he's just a next level type of guy that is a storyteller in a really unique area, which is advertising. And when you watch his stuff, you don't even think of what you're watching as a commercial.
Right.
At all. You're like, this is actually...
It's a film.
Yeah, this is like a miniature movie that I'm watching.
Right.
So powerful, so emotional. And I had no idea that he was working on like political campaigns in Venezuela, for instance.
That's crazy.
And doing crazy kinds of guerrilla marketing techniques in these third world countries. For good, though. I mean, he's not the Cambridge Analytica stuff where, they're trying to influence elections for evil. He's actually doing really good work. Trying to overcome voter suppression campaigns with dictatorships and things like that. And to get to know Jim, even though I've known him for years as my good friend's older brother, to get to know him this way professionally and really do a deep dive into his career was a lot of fun. I think he's a perfect fit actually for the podcast.
I do too now. I didn't, I was like, sales, marketing.
I know. I remember we were talking about it. You're like, who are you going to interview? Jim Haven. Yeah, he's an advertising guy. You're like, oh, okay. Well, we'll see how that works out.
I see it now.
Yeah, but it's he's just a profoundly smart and inventive dude when it comes to storytelling. And my favorite, I mean, I still go back to the Pacifico ads where he grabbed his Super 8 camera and goes to the Baja Peninsula and is following these surfers and following these surf breaks and catching these moments of this very unique type of vacationing that makes people, I think, a little bit envious of those folks. It's like, I want to be there on that beach.
Totally.
I don't want to be at some resort, some all-inclusive resort. I want to be, blazing my own trail, basically. Right. And that's kind of the vibe of those commercials or those ads.
I wanted immediately to go get some Pacifico after that too.
Yeah.
Made me thirsty watching it.
Right. Yeah. So, I enjoyed that episode, and I think it's a great precursor to launch into the Sundance episodes.
Yes.
Which will start on
Wednesday,
February 19th. Yes.
That's right.
And we're going to roll out these interviews one per week. We're going to increase the frequency of these interviews to one per week, which is a change because normally we're only putting out 2 episodes or 2 interviews per month. Now we're going to 4 per month. But the reason for that is I have so much content that I came back with, so many great interviews from Sundance and Park City that I just don't want to wait 4 months. I have 8 interviews and I want people to be able to hear them sooner rather than later. And I think the guests deserve that as well. They agreed to sit down with me and share their journey with me. And I don't want them to have to wait to hear their episode.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good to just let them roll out too. So tell me about your experience down there at the Sundance Film Festival, Bryan.
Well, it was a first time experience for me showing up as a member of the press. I have been to Sundance before with my wife just as a film goer, just to see movies.
Right.
And I applied for press credentials. They gave them to me, and I took advantage of every opportunity I could with those press credentials. I was able to get into direct contact with all of the publicists for all of the films to be able to schedule long-form interviews with directors and actors and production assistants and cinematographers. And it was just an amazing, the type of access that I was given was awesome. I also did red carpet interviews. So showing up at the red carpet premiere of these movies to interview stars and producers and directors as they're walking down the red carpet. And I showed up completely unprepared, not knowing what equipment to use, what type of microphones to use in that noisy environment, what type of cameras to use. But I learned a hell of a lot, met a lot of really great people, journalists who were helpful and helped me kind of navigate those situations. I remember at the premiere of a movie called Black Bear with Aubrey Plaza and Christopher Abbott. Mm-hmm. I'm on the red carpet. I think it was my first red carpet. And I was asking one of before the people came out, before the talent came out to the red carpet, I asked one of the journalists, well, what do you ask these people? I haven't seen their movie yet. And my approach is I do a lot of research before I do interviews. So if I'm going to interview a guest, I look at their body of work. I read their books. I watch their movies. I listen to their music. Mm-hmm. But here I've got all of this talent walking down the red carpet toward me. I know Aubrey Plaza was in Parks and Rec.
Right.
Great show. My family loved that show.
Yes, excellent show.
But I had not seen Black Bear. And I had no idea what that movie was about. So I asked a journalist next to me, like, what do you ask these people? And she's like, I don't know. Just ask them what it was like to work with that director. Ask them what attracted them to this role. Those types of questions.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, okay. So they show up, hand them my Dreampath microphone. What was it like working with this director? What attracted you to this role? I just basically copycatted the questions. And then eventually it became more organic for me. And it was almost second nature toward the end of the festival to be able to ask questions in the moment that were genuine and authentic. And it was a lot of fun to talk to, Will Ferrell, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Tony Hale, Garrett Dillahunt, and just a lot of folks that were there because of the premiere, but they were gracious to talk to, people like me, nobodies that are not associated with a big network, but they spent time with me answering my questions on the red carpet. And it really meant a lot to have that type of access for my podcast and also my professional development as a journalist. So it was a lot of fun.
And I can tell you that there's quite a bit of stuff to sift through yet, but there's some usable stuff we can get from those red carpet, from some of that you did. And I know there's some video of you with Will Ferrell also.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that. It wasn't all for nothing.
Well, it was a learning curve for sure, and a great experience. And I know that I'll come back if they give me press credentials again next year. I'll go back and I'll be really prepared to come back with all types of great content that I'll be able to share with my listeners.
So on February 19th, when we start releasing these Sundance episodes, who is going to be the first guest?
Good question. I think that we're going to start with a director by the name of Jeff Orlowski.
Okay.
And the reason for that is Jeff has been on my radar for quite some time. I went to Sundance last year, and I went to the premiere of a movie called Fighting with My Family with The Rock and Vince Vaughn and Florence Pugh, who was nominated for an Oscar for Little Women, I think.
Yep.
Great actress. And I was sitting there next to Vince Vaughn and The Rock, and to my left was a beautiful young woman from Panama, and to her left was Jeff Orlowski, who is the director of documentaries called Chasing Ice, which he won an Emmy for, and then also Chasing Coral. These are environmental documentaries that are really scary, actually, and really profoundly kind of existentially frightening, because they're talking about global warming and kind of the irreversible effects of global warming, including the bleaching of coral. And so he's this guy that has fascinated me, because ever since I met him at that premiere last year, I started looking at his body of work, and I reached out to him. And of course, I was asking for an interview as I had just started my podcast about that time. And he was on location and just busy, and his people were, telling me that he wasn't available for an interview. And then he showed up at the Artists at the Table event this year. And I had been trying to reach out to his publicist and saying, hey, I'm here for the festival. I noticed that he's here. He's got a movie showing. It's called The Social Dilemma. And I really want to talk to him. So it was kind of a chase, actually, to, kind of a hustle to get him to agree to sit down with me. And I feel like I kind of owe it to myself to have that be the first of the Sundance episodes, since that's the episode that I kind of chased the hardest, And I ended up seeing his movie, The Social Dilemma, at Sundance this year. And I brought my photographer, Tanner, with me, and he was just shaken up by it, really. I mean, it's a very powerful message. And
well, without giving it away too much, what's it kind of about? The Social Dilemma?
It's about social media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's really not spoiling anything to talk about the premise of the documentary, which is that there are some fundamental problems with social media that we're all kind of aware of in terms of the privacy issues and how our attention spans are compromised because of the screen time, how it's changed our relationships with each other, with ourselves.
Yep.
It's changed how we view ourselves. There's, the suicide rate has gone up exponentially for young people.
Crazy.
And it's directly linked to social media. And so the fascinating thing about this film, and again, I don't think I'm giving away too much when I talk about this. It's an amazing documentary. And I know it's going to be picked up by some major streaming service probably. Hopefully it shows up in theaters. But the amazing part about this film is that Jeff is actually a Stanford graduate. And so he has all of these tech people that he went to school with who are now these social media billionaires.
Wow.
Who went off to work at PayPal and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. And so he's friends with the guy who invented the like button on Facebook. So that's how connected Jeff Orlowski is.
I'd like to give that guy a thumbs up.
Thumbs up, man. And so, but he has these connections that allowed him to bring these folks into his film, and he interviews them. And what they're telling the audience is, I don't let my kids on social media, period, ever. I'm not on it. My kids aren't on it. And they're the ones who frickin' invented it.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. So I strongly recommend the film. I'm really looking forward to hearing the edited version of the interview. He was gracious with his time. He was super busy. He was actually waiting for text messages about selling his film as we were doing the interview. So he's like looking at his phone. He's like, I apologize in advance. I have to have my phone in front of me when we're talking because I'm waiting for the, these certain messages from people who are going to be, possibly selling the movie for him.
Well, he's got to make a living too.
Yeah. But that's a very long answer to a very easy question, which is who's going to be our first guest? Jeff Orlowski.
Right.
Total badass.
February 19th.
Yeah.
Check it out.
And then we're going to roll out the rest of the interviews, one per week for 2 months. And we may have recaps. We may not, it just depends on what the vibe is and, what we think is needed for, launching those episodes.
Right on.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Good talking to you, Jason.
Thank you, Bryan.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Dreampath podcast. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to your favorite podcast service and give me a rating and review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. I appreciate your time, and as always, go find your dream path.